All right, everyone. So I wanted to make a quick short lecture here, video on how to organize your essays for the midterm, right? So you have your actual essay topics. This is more how to organize each one topically, what's a good way to do it, what are things to avoid. You already, again, have in your modules in week 4 the essays itself, the IDs and essays, and I put them back up here as you could see. And you have the other sheet I gave you, what's an ASA, and it kind of gives you a point-by-point breakdown, so make sure you read that as well. This is not a substitute for you reading that. And I give you, I may have also even included some printed tip sheet as well, but this is more just kind of verbally explaining it to you. I do this in my in-person classes, so I thought I would kind of just record this for you guys as well. In the past, sometimes I've done kind of a Zoom review, but a lot of people don't turn into that, so I just thought I'd record one here. So let's just take each one, right? Compare and contrast the constitutional monarchy in England with the absolute form in France. How and why did each develop, and what are the specific characteristics of each form? So when you're working on an essay, the first thing to think about is organization, right? So you're going to have, paragraph number 1. So the first paragraph, I'm just trying to get a highlighter here or marker or pen. All right, paragraph number 1, right? So you always start with paragraph number 1, which is always going to be your intro. Now, your introduction paragraph doesn't need to be super detailed, just a short little paragraph restating the essay question, but you do want some sort of introduction. One thing I do tell students is, because this exam is timed, if you misspell a word, forget a comma, I'm not going to like ding you a whole bunch of points. But if your essay is not even organized, if I get like pages written and it's one paragraph or run-on sentences and all of that, that's a problem. So they do need to be organized, coherent, so keep that in mind as you're preparing these. And again, just as a reminder, you're not copying and pasting anything into the text box. You don't need to do any outside information. All the information to do these IDs and essays are going to come from my lecture notes, your reading, the textbook reading, and the primary source readings that I assign. You don't need to do other stuff, right? I don't want you to really. I want you to focus on that material primarily. So compare and contrast. So what would you do? So first thing is you have kind of a couple parts to this. If we break it down, if we kind of highlight this, how and why did each develop, and what are the specific characteristics? So what you would have is paragraph number 2 should probably at that point be take constitutional monarchy, right? And you could go in either order, but I would do constitutional monarchy first and explain how constitutional monarchy developed. So that would be paragraph number 2. And on that, that's where you're going to want to hit all the people from, James the First, Charles the First, Cromwell, all of that, right? All the way down to James the Second and the Glorious Revolution. So that would be paragraph number 2. Paragraph number 3 on that essay, that would be, what are the characteristics of constitutional monarchy? And that's where you're going to want your primary source. Remember that Bill of Rights that we talked about? So that Bill of Rights of like 1688, 1689, that Bill of Rights, you want to be able to explain. It's in your primary source reader. So that would be paragraph number 3. Paragraph number 4 on that essay is going to jump to absolutism. How did absolutism develop? And then you give examples of that, and you talk about Henry IV, Louis the 13th, and so forth. Now, could you take like paragraph 2 and paragraph number 4 and break them up a little bit more into a couple more paragraphs? You can. If you find yourself kind of going along a long way, you can kind of even break those up a little bit, but you can probably swing those. As long as you're not doing one long paragraph for everything, you should be okay. But paragraph number 4 would be how absolute monarchy developed. And then paragraph number 5 would be what are the characteristics of absolutism. And there for paragraph number 5, you'd obviously spend, I'm drawing this with my mouse so it's not very clear, but paragraph number 5, you would be talking about Louis the 14th, all the examples I gave you, and not just the examples I gave you, again, anything that might be in your textbook or anything like that. So that would be paragraph number 5. And then paragraph number 6 would be a conclusion. Now, I will say this, I don't really ding students points if you don't get time to do a conclusion. It's nice to have one, but if you're like running out of time, I'd rather give you more context and more detail in the actual essay than worry about the conclusion too much, right? But definitely something if you have time, you can include. But that's how I would organize essay number 1. Okay, so I hope all that is clear. Essay number 2. So for essay number 2, it looks straightforward, right? Where it says, discuss the cause of the French Revolution. All right, well, what are you doing? So again, paragraph number 1 is always going to be your introductory paragraph. Let me get my mouse again here. So paragraph number 1, you have your introduction. And you might say, the French Revolution was a dramatic event in the history of France. There were long-term and short-term causes of the French Revolution that involved many factors, right? Something very basic. I don't need much. Paragraph number 2 is you start. Now, where do you start? I mean, you can go chronologically. That makes a lot of sense for an essay like this. So maybe paragraph number 2 might be absolutism. The story of Louis the 14th, ironically, right? And how you'd have Louis, again, I don't really draw well with his mouse, but Louis the 14th there. And that might be paragraph number 2. And now, if all you do is say, well, Louis the 14th was an absolute monarch, that doesn't help me. The thing is on that essay is you got to explain it, right? How did Louis the 14th help cause the French Revolution? Give examples. You wrote the Edict of Nantes, whatever it is, right? Paragraph number 3, a very important topic you should focus on is the Enlightenment. But again, don't just gown the Enlightenment. What Enlightenment ideas were there? How did those Enlightenment ideas help bring about the French Revolution? And then a really strong essay shows how during the French Revolution there were references to the Enlightenment. So if you've watched the French Revolution lectures, I talk about the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen, another thing in your primary source packet. You should be able to kind of connect things there a little bit with that. Paragraph number 4 should probably be the role of Louis the 15th, right? So don't forget that. Paragraph number 5, and maybe paragraph, so paragraph number 5, this is where you're getting a lot more stuff. You're going to get Louis the 16th. Now, Louis the 16th, Marie Antoinette, there's a lot there, so maybe you do that in 2 paragraphs, paragraph 5 and paragraph 6, where you talk about things like the U.S. Revolution, the bad economy, and all of those issues. You might be able to squeeze that into 1 paragraph, but you need to be very clear. Don't just say, well, there was a bad economy. So what? Explain it. Don't just say U.S. Revolution happened. So what? Explain it. How did the U.S. Revolution help cause the French Revolution? So that would be like paragraph number 5. Paragraph number 6, and this is the one that a lot of people forget about, is the States General, right? In the meeting of this States General, what happens within the States General, that's where it gets a little complicated, but I want you to show that you can explain that. And then you get to Bastille Day, and boom, you're done. What I sometimes get on this essay, and this is one of those things I don't want you to do, I see people writing about Robespierre and Napoleon, and I'm like, what does this got to do with the causes of the French Revolution? There is plenty of stuff on the causes if you do it well and you're detailed and you organize it well. So that's how I would organize essay number 2. And then again, a conclusion at the end. All right? All right, next, essay number 3. Essay number 3 is a fun one. Discuss the rise of Napoleon and rise and fall of Napoleon, and from his time in power, explaining if he was a child of enlightenment or a typical authoritarian dictator. All right, so again, introduction is paragraph number 1. And then after you do your introduction, paragraph number 2 on that one is going to naturally be his rise. Now, for his rise, make sure you include things from the documentary I showed you, asked you to watch in your modules. Make sure you talk about his life in Corsica, all the way up until he became, first consul. All of that is part of his rise. Then you could kind of do the next part. This is where it gets interesting. You could do paragraph 3, and then you got to have to decide, is he a child of the enlightenment or a dictator? Now, I don't care what you pick. You could say he was one, or you could say he was the other, but whatever you pick, you have to show. Now, if you say he was a child of enlightenment, and then you give all the examples of how he's a child of the enlightenment, and just pretend nothing else happened, that's not a strong essay. If, on the other hand, you say he's a typical authoritarian dictator, and you ignore all the things he did as a child of enlightenment, that's not a strong answer. So a really good essay is probably going to have a couple paragraphs here, because you're going to have your position maybe, or maybe the other position, say, despite the fact he did all these authoritarian things, and maybe you explain that in paragraph 3. In paragraph 4, you explain the Enlightenment ideas he did maintain were more significant, right? Or vice versa. Or you take another approach, we say he was maybe one more than the other. Or you take the approach he started one way and became more another way. So there's different ways you could take it, but I'm going to be looking in that essay that you have all the key points and ideas, not just one narrow view of him, because he is a complex individual. So you're going to need probably 2 or 3 paragraphs on this one. So this is a little different. There isn't as much a set way to organize it, but you definitely need to hit all those ideas. Once you get that, then you still need another paragraph or 2 on his fall. Now, for his fall, a common mistake people make is they just go to the Russian campaign. Got to start a little bit before. You should probably talk a little bit about his failure to defeat Lord Nelson in the Navy, and then, of course, the Russian campaign, and then the back and forth from Elba, then coming home, then St. Helena, you'd want it, Waterloo, all of that stuff you'd want to explain. So, again, you could probably do that in a paragraph, but you might need a couple paragraphs for that. All right, so that would be paragraph 5 and maybe into paragraph 6, and then, again, a conclusion. All right, so I hope that one is pretty straightforward. That's a little bit oh, the other thing on that essay is people are tempted to use I because of the way the sentence is worded. I think Napoleon is. Never use I. That's true on all your essays. Don't use the first person. Just say Napoleon is this or Napoleon is that. Don't use the first person when you write. All right, and then finally, the last one here, possible, and again, you don't know which of these 4 essays you're going to get, so you want to prepare all of them, is I think maybe the most straightforward of them all. If essay 3 is a little bit more nuanced and stuff, essay 4 is pretty straightforward, but there's a lot to write about, and that is what are the causes and impacts of the Persian of the Industrial Revolution, right? Causes and impacts of the Industrial Revolution. So, how do you organize this? Obviously, paragraph number 1, intro. Paragraph number 2, causes of the Industrial Revolution. And you could probably do that in one paragraph, but don't just list them. Don't just say economic and inventions and this and that. Give examples. But you could do that in one fairly good paragraph. I would definitely say for the impacts, you're going to need a couple paragraphs, at least 2 or 3 paragraphs. So maybe paragraph 3, 4, and 5 would be for the impacts. And maybe you could do it different ways. You could do maybe one paragraph on these are the impacts on topography. Maybe another paragraph on these are all the positive things that came out of the Industrial Revolution, how it improved people's lives. And then maybe the next paragraph number 5, is these are the negative impacts of the Industrial Revolution. Some of the negative things that happened. And again, I'm going to be looking for both. The positives and the negatives. And then people go, do I need to go into the progressive years? Well, maybe a little bit, sure, because there were some things that I lectured on the progressive years that relate to the Industrial Revolution as well. So if you can make those connections, paragraph number 6 would be good on some of the other things associated with the progressive years that we get as a result of the Industrial Revolution, other impacts. So definitely you do want a paragraph on the causes, but you want to want several paragraphs on the impacts. If you do all the impacts in one paragraph, it's going to be too much, too convoluted, and you're not following it well. So you definitely want multiple paragraphs on that. And then again, as always, if you have time at the end, do a conclusion. All right, so that's pretty much it. Those are, I think, the best ways to organize each of the 4 essays. Again, you don't know which one's going to come up, so be prepared for all of them. Again, if you have questions as you're preparing, you can feel free to shoot me an email or whatever. I'm happy to help you out with them. Use the textbook, use the primary sources. Citing them, people say, how do I cite them? Well, because it's just the stuff we're using for the class. If you simply say, in the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, it says boop, 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 that's fine. You don't need like page number or whatever in it, right? Then that'll be okay. All right, so I hope that's helpful, and you can kind of use this to help you review. All right, that's it. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.